Hello and welcome to this installment of Humans in Debate. Today, we have our amazing guest, Angela Wang, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So, we'll just start off really quickly. If you could go ahead, just tell us your name, your pronouns, and where you're from.
Yeah, so my name is Angela Wang. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm from Plano, Texas.
Awesome. And then, what grade are you in, and what events are you competing in currently, and what have you done in the past?
Yeah, so I'm currently a senior in high school. I compete mostly in international extemporaneous speaking, and I also do congressional debate on the side. And yeah, those are the two main events that I've done, and of course, domestic extemp as well.
Awesome. So, getting into the big questions for today, first and foremost, we wanted to start with something like who's a role model that you look up to, inside or outside of the speech and debate community?
Yeah, so definitely my biggest role model in the speech and debate community is my very long time mentor. Her name is Jacqueline Way. She also came from Plano West and she also did extemp. And she has just been there for me since I was a freshman and has helped me this entire time. But the biggest reason I look up to her is just because she's really helped me with my confidence throughout the years and just like letting me just like coaching me through a lot of the nerves and just learning to be self-assured in myself. So, and she's just the most powerful female I know. So that's another reason. Yeah.
That's awesome, especially since she comes from like the same school as you. I feel like that's
Exactly.
always so nice,
Yeah.
especially having alumni networks like that.
Yeah. So we'd also like go to travel tournaments and everything. So it was
That's
good.
so fun. I
Yeah.
miss travel tournaments.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, going off of different women in debate and their experiences, what would you say is the biggest challenge that women are currently facing in speech and debate?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I'd say probably the biggest is just the constant feeling of it's kind of subconscious. Like I don't think it's necessarily that people are openly talking about like, oh, like you are lesser than and stuff. I think it's just the feeling of like an extemp if you like walk into a prep room and just feeling like you're just not always going to be a part of it no matter like you feel like you always have to prove yourself almost. Whereas I feel like with dudes it's kind of like there isn't that constant expectation that like it's kind of just like, oh, if you have the competitive success in the past, like you're good, you're um like there is this expectation immediately for them that they don't have to worry about that, I guess. And so I just feel like that there is this constant subconscious pressure that girls have to feel like they have to prove themselves constantly through competitive success, even though I feel like we should just be self-assured in ourselves regardless.
Sure, I 100% agree with that. I think that's so pertinent to especially like in the online world where it's so hard to break
Yeah,
into those
exactly.
conversations. I think especially this year. That's
Yeah, I'd say like kind of going off of that, I feel like in the online world, it's so based off of like, it's so much easier for judges to be like, oh, you sound like too shrill and stuff like that. And you have to like modulate your voice and stuff. So it's definitely, yeah, I'd say it's definitely harder.
for sure.
Yeah.
Going off of that, can you describe any struggles that you've experienced as a female in the speech and debate community, or some that people close to you have experienced?
Yeah. So I'd say that I feel more fortunate in extent that I'd say kind of like that judge screw process of like very arbitrary reasons for getting screwed, like are not as relevant in extent as I'd say like more debate heavy events. Like I think congressional debate is definitely where I've felt that idea of like there was actually an instance of this person, this guy that I was doing congressional debate with, and I think I was like explaining an argument in the hallway or something, and he literally like grabbed me by the top of my backpack and pulled me back. He's like, "Whoa, like you're getting kind of feisty there," and it yeah, it really was very jarring to me. I think that's like the biggest instance, and I think um, I wouldn't say I'm just fortunate that hasn't happened like too often to me, but I do have a lot of people that are close to me that I know like literally on their ballots it'll be like a comment or two about either like dressing differently and like also some expectations from like past coaches and stuff, but yeah, like either dressing differently or like sounding too shrill and stuff. So I'd say like that's probably the most common thing.
For sure. I agree with that. So, going off of that and turning towards the more positive, what has been what you'd say is your proudest moment in speech and debate?
Yeah, so I can definitely think of one. It was at state this year, I believe, at El Paso, Texas. And I was like in the hallway leaving one of my rooms. And then this girl stopped me in the hallway and she was like, "Oh, are you Angela Wing?" I was like, "Yeah." And then she was like, It was so cute. She like stopped and then just suddenly like started saying super quickly. She was like, "Oh, like I'm such a big fan. You're such a role model." And you're like, it was just like this whole big rant of hers. And um, at the end of it, she just like hugged me quickly and then ran away. And that definitely, yeah, that's still 100% like the highlight of my STEM career. And it's just like it was just I think almost jarring to me because I didn't even like I throughout extemp had always looked up to these like powerful females and I would probably have reacted the same way. And it was just such a surreal moment for me to realize that like I was that person for some people. And I don't know, it was pretty incredible. Yeah.
For sure. It's always like the small things I find. Like
Yeah,
you
exactly.
could talk about like trophies, but really like those things, my coach likes to say they're just like shiny pieces of plastic, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And then like in the end, it's like the person to person that really, really sticks
exactly.
with you.
Yeah.
Awesome. What would you say is the biggest factor to help you succeed in speech and debate that's helped you get to where
Mm,
you are now?
totally. Um, so I think the bigger word that sounds very cliche is in general, it was a confidence thing for me. But I think probably more specifically, it was just this like really, I guess, unfettered embrace of just being myself. And that sounds cliche, but what I mean by that is that I think there was this constant expectation in my head all throughout extemp where I was like, oh, I need to like I would literally model my voice off of other people's voices. Like I was
Mm.
like, I have to fit this mold. And I just kept going off of that. But there was a point in my junior year, it was actually state last year in junior, when I had just I gave my final speech and it was very like untamed. I'd say like I was just kind of like saying the jokes I want to say. I was like saying things more casually and just like really being myself and just being as like casual and quirky as I wanted to. And I think that that embrace is something that people are scared of because they're like, oh, it's not like professional if I don't sound like an extempore enough. But I think really just like going all in for how you want to say things and how you would say things in like a conversation. I think that's probably been like the biggest part to my success.
For sure. I think especially coming from extemp, it's always like there's almost a certain like reporter voice to put on. And my
Exactly.
coaches have always been like, yeah, like snap out of it. Like you don't need to do that.
Yeah,
And I think it's definitely a growth thing to where I can start cracking jokes in the intros. And I feel like
exactly.
it's
Mhm.
it seems like super universal too. Because like the people who start out in extemp are always like, oh no, like I can't crack jokes. And I'm like,
Exactly.
well, now you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
So going off of that, were there any difficult decisions that you faced in your career or challenges that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, we had to think a little bit about that.
No
Um,
worries.
so yeah, I think there's a really clear one. It was during, nationals my sophomore year, I think. And it was and this is, like, maybe seems a little bit insignificant to me now, but in the moment it felt very significant. But it was the semis round of Nats my sophomore year, and I had gone in the round my first semi speech, and I came out feeling super super bad about it. Like I remember I was like, oh my god, I was that was definitely like a dead last speech. It just didn't feel right. But right afterwards, I went and I talked to Jackie, and she was like, you never know where you are in a tournament, so you like can't let go because if you like look back and if you give up now and you look back on your ranks and realize you were doing well, like that would be very regretful. So I think that I was really, really in my feels. Like I was like, oh my god, I messed up my chance. But I think that was like really important for my growth because it was just a very like it's helped me come to the point today where it's like it literally doesn't matter what results are happening. I just have to like you just have to keep going. And so like after that talk with her, I like was like, okay, it's fine. And then I went and gave that second speech, and sure enough, I like my ranks were actually fine that first round. So I think that that was just really like a very helpful moment for me to realize that you can never get down because there's always going to be ups and downs with your speeches, but you just have to keep going and just keep your head up.
For sure, because it definitely is so easy to get in your head
Yeah,
again in the online world because you don't have those same people around you after round to be like, hey, snap out of it. And I
yeah.
feel like it's such a thing. It's almost like it's definitely a mental game and a game of resilience, especially this year.
Exactly. Like I'd say, I've said this a lot to so many people, but I really do think that speech and like extemp and stuff is just like more than half of it is mentality. Like there's a certain point where you can like master the technicalities and stuff, but I feel like the most important thing is getting to the point where even if you feel like you didn't like prepare enough or like the speech isn't good enough, you still have to be able to walk in and be confident, like give it your all.
Absolutely. So going off of that, kind of actually right in line of what you were saying, what would you say is a good mindset to be approaching speech and debate with?
Yeah. So this was that's a really good question because I think that that's the biggest like struggle I've had
Mhm.
throughout speech and debate. And I think it's just making sure that you don't think so much about like these are things that are like easier said than done. But in general, the idea is like one, just don't think too hard about things you can't control. Like I've heard so many novices that are like, oh, like I have hard people in my room, like my judge, like people search up like their judges and like all that stuff. Um, but I think just like not, I mean, I think it's just a simple concept. It's like you can't change it, so don't dwell on it. That's like the first thing. But I think second is this concept of not like worrying about what others think, like what the judge is going to think about the speech or like what the rank is going to turn out as. But it's just like always thinking that it's like, I'm going to give my very best speech. Like you only focus on the speech at hand and you walk out of the room. And if the judge doesn't like it, like, of course, you're going to get some judges you feel like is literally the best speech you've ever given. And they're going to give you the six. And it's just how it is. So I think it's like, really just removing yourself from all these extraneous factors. And I really try to just channel into this one speech I'm prepping, this joke I'm going to deliver, this like source I'm memorizing. And I think that that's really helped me like not worry about things. But I also think that it really like you don't have anything to regret at the end of it because it's like you literally did the very best you can. And then so what? Like the rank doesn't really matter. As long as you're proud of the speech, like that's all that matters.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Like, I think in senior year, for me, it's just been like, I don't want to regret anything. Like, I want to go through it and say I've tried everything and done everything that I wanted to do, even if I might have like lost a couple points because of it.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree.
So, going along that line, if you could start your journey in speech debate over from day one as a novice, is there anything that you do differently from before, or would you keep it all the same?
That's a really good question. Um, I think I'd probably try to start a little more confidently, but I think in a more concrete sense, what that means is one thing that really, really helped me, like, in my opinion, it kind of was a switch between like this unconfidence in myself and more confidence was literally just like speaking louder. And I think that's something I've seen with a lot of girls is that they just tend to like speak in a very like, not like they're trying to speak soft, but it's like, I think there is kind of this if you just speak at a louder volume, it just kind of helps you fill the room. But it's also like a mental like subconscious thing where you feel like that you're filling the room better and you feel like your own presence is stronger. So I think I would just tell myself to like speak at a louder volume, and I think that did a lot for my confidence and my presence in general.
I can second that. I think for me, it's definitely been like making sure, just like speaking up literally has been
Yeah,
like a huge thing just for me and like a bunch of other people who I've
yeah.
seen grow throughout time.
Hmm.
So last but not least, what would you like to say or what advice would you give to like young female debaters, extempers, speech kids who are just starting off?
Yeah. So I think it's just always like just believing in the process and just know that every ounce of effort you give, like, of course, there are those judge screws and stuff, but I think speech and debate, we all know, is a very like it's very labor intensive and emotionally like it's like emotionally, mentally, physically exhausting. But I think it's just really important to keep that mindset in mind that it's like if I work hard, things will pay off, which sometimes feels like it's not going to, right? Like if you get screwed and stuff. Um, but I think just remembering that like because things get tough, but it's like as long as you like find a new way to like you will find a way to like get past those like small like technical errors and stuff and as long as you just have confidence in like your own effort and stuff I think that translates into like okay when I give this speech this is like the best version of myself and I have worked at this and it will pay off and I think it's not just a matter of like um telling yourself that but it's like really internalizing it because I think when that happens when you give the speech it comes across like that too it's like I do know what I'm saying and I have worked at this because I think there will be people you face, especially in like debate events, like I'd say in congressional debate, where they're trying to get in your head or like even your opponents in extent. I've seen people literally like walk by a prep table and like try to like glance at your question and like walk really close to you. Like it's just like really odd things like that. You're going to face people like that. Um, but really, it's like none of that matters as long as you cling on to like your like the product of your own effort if that makes any sense. So I think it's just remembering that it will all work itself out, and there's going to be a lot of problems along the way, but things will sort out as they should.
Absolutely. I really think it just for everyone, it's a team activity, but it's also very much about individual growth and about individual just evolution through it and all and
Mhm.
learning from each other, which in the end contributes to like the best individual performance you could possibly have.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yes, so that is all we have today. Thank you so, so much for coming by. Thank you so, so much for doing this with us. It has been absolutely amazing. And thank you again.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me.